The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep hum that seemed to shake the very walls. Ambassador Jiho Kim stepped inside, his black suit looking small and simple compared to the grand hall that stretched before him. Behind him walked 5 other humans, each carrying themselves with the quiet dignity that Earth had taught them to maintain even in the face of the impossible. The chamber was huge beyond imagination. Floating platforms held representatives from 12 different alien species, each more strange and wonderful than anything humanity had ever dreamed of. Some looked like living crystals that caught and reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Others appeared to be made of flowing liquid metal that never stopped moving. In one corner, beings that resembled giant insects clicked and buzzed in their own language, while across the room, creatures of pure energy flickered between different colors. Gaho had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, 3 years of learning alien languages, studying their customs, and practicing the speeches that he hoped would convince them to accept humanity as equals in their grand community of stars. He had read every document Earth could get about the Galactic Council. He had watched recordings of their meetings until he could recognize each species by the way they moved. He had dreamed of this day and feared it in equal measure. The platform that held the human delegation rose slowly into the center of the chamber. As it moved, Jiho could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him. Some showed curiosity, others showed what might have been amusement, and a few showed nothing at all that human minds could understand. At the highest platform in the chamber sat Council Speaker Vex, a being from the Alphan Empire that stood 3 meters tall and looked like it had been carved from living diamond. When Vex spoke, his voice came through translation devices that made the words sound cold and sharp like winter wind. "So," Vex said, and the entire chamber fell silent. "The humans of Earth have finally come to us. After sending messages for years, you now stand before the Council to ask for membership among the civilized species of the galaxy." Jiho stepped forward and bowed in the manner he had been taught showed respect to the Alphan. "Honored Speaker Vex, honored representatives. Of all species present, we come to you with open hearts and minds. Earth wishes to join the community of worlds and contribute what we can to the peace and safety of all." A sound filled the chamber that took Jiho a moment to recognize. It was laughter. Not the warm laughter of friends sharing a joke, but the cruel laughter of those who find something ridiculous and pathetic. The sound came from dozens of different species, each expressing amusement in their own way. The crystal beings chimed like broken bells. The liquid metal creatures made sounds like water bubbling over hot stones. The insect-like aliens clicked their mandibles in rapid patterns. Vex raised one of his arms, and the laughter slowly died away. "Contribute," he repeated, as if the word tasted strange in his mouth. "And what exactly does Earth believe it can contribute to our advanced civilization?" Jiho felt his heart racing, but he kept his voice steady. "We offer our knowledge, our different ways of thinking, and our willingness to defend the galaxy alongside you. Earth has many skilled engineers, soldiers, and scientists who could serve the Council well." "Show us," said a voice from across the chamber. It came from Admiral Kenth, another Alphan whose crystal body was marked with scars that spoke of many battles. "Show us these primitive humans and their crude technology." A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing images that made Jiho's stomach sink. There were Earth's rockets, looking like metal toys compared to the sleek ships that filled the space around the Council station. There were human weapons that used chemical explosives, while the aliens had energy beams that could cut through mountains. There were human computers that filled entire rooms, while alien devices the size of coins could calculate the movement of entire star systems. The laughter started again, louder this time. Jiho heard words in alien languages that the translators turned into phrases like primitive, backward, and hopeless. He felt his face burning with shame, but he forced himself to stand straight and keep looking ahead. "Chemical rockets," Vex said, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "Kinetic weapons. Computer systems that would have been considered ancient when my species first reached the stars 10,000 years ago." He paused, letting the words sink in. This is what Earth offers to the galaxy. One of the humans behind Jiho, a woman named Captain Soyang Han, stepped forward. Our technology may be different from yours, but we have proven ourselves capable of learning and adapting. Given the chance, we could— Silence, Vex commanded, and Captain Han fell quiet. The Galactic Council has heard your request, humans. Of Earth, we have seen what you call your contributions, and we have made our decision. The chamber fell completely silent. Jiho could hear his own heartbeat and the quiet breathing of his fellow humans. This was the moment everything depended on. 3 years of work, the hopes of an entire planet, the future of humanity among the stars, all of it came down to the next words from the crystal being who towered above them. The Council will accept Earth as a member species, Vex said, and for one brief moment Jiho felt his heart soar with joy. Then Vex continued, and that joy turned to ice in his chest. However, membership requires contribution to galactic defense. Since your technology is so limited, we will provide you with a vessel appropriate to your capabilities. The holographic display changed, showing a ship that made Jiho want to close his eyes in shame. It was clearly old and damaged, with a hull that was more rust than metal and engines that looked like they belonged in a scrapyard. Holes in the armor had been roughly patched with different types of metal that did not match. The weapons were outdated mining lasers that any real military ship could destroy from a safe distance. This is Scrap Heap 7, Vex announced, and the chamber filled with laughter once again. A decommissioned mining vessel from the Outer Rim. Its systems barely function, its armor is compromised, and its weapons are suitable only for breaking apart asteroids. It is, we believe, perfectly matched to human abilities. Jiho stared at the image of the ship that would become humanity's contribution to galactic defense. Every line of its damaged hull seemed to mock him. Every patch and repair spoke of failure and desperation. This was not a ship, it was an insult wrapped in corroded metal and given to them as a joke. You will take this vessel, Vex continued, and prove that Earth deserves its place among the civilized worlds. The Council expects you to patrol the outer systems and deal with minor pirate problems. Nothing too difficult for your limited capabilities. The laughter had stopped now, replaced by something worse pity. Jiho could see it in the way the alien representatives looked at him and his fellow humans. They were not angry or afraid. They simply felt sorry for these primitive creatures who thought they could play with the adults. Do you accept these terms? Vex asked. Or will Earth withdraw its application for membership? Jiho looked at his companions. Captain Han met his eyes and gave a small nod. The others did the same. They had come too far and sacrificed too much to give up now, even in the face of this humiliation. We accept, Jiho said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Earth accepts membership in the Galactic Council and the vessel you have provided. Excellent, Vex replied, and there was satisfaction in his crystalline voice. The ship is waiting in Docking Bay 12. We look forward to seeing what humans can accomplish with proper equipment. As the platform began to lower, carrying the human delegation away from the center of the chamber, Jiho heard the aliens begin to talk among themselves. Through the translation devices, he caught fragments of conversation. They were making bets on how long the human ship would last before suffering complete system failure. The most optimistic gave them a month. Most predicted they would be calling for rescue within a week. The doors closed behind them with the same deep hum they had opened with, shutting out the voices of beings who had just reduced humanity's dreams to a cruel joke. Jiho and his companions stood in the corridor outside, facing a future that looked nothing like what they had hoped for. Well, Captain Han said after a long moment of silence, at least we got in. Jiho nodded, though he was not sure if getting in was worth what they had just been put through. In a few hours they would board a ship that was little more than flying junk and head out into space where pirates and other dangers waited. They would be alone, mocked, and equipped with technology that their enemies would laugh at just as hard as the Council had, but they were still humans, and humans had never learned how to give up when things looked impossible. As they walked toward Docking Bay 12 and the ship that waited there, none of them could have imagined that this moment of humiliation would become the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. The ship that waited in Docking Bay 12 was even worse than the holographic display had suggested. Captain Minho Park stood at the airlock entrance, staring at what was supposed to be humanity's contribution to galactic defense. The hull looked like it had been through a war and lost badly. Patches of different colored metal-covered holes where micrometeors had punched through the armor. Wires hung loose from open panels, sparking occasionally in ways that made him wonder if the life support would last long enough to leave the station. Behind him, Chief Engineer Yuna Lee let out a low whistle as she examined her scanner readings. "Sir, I'm reading 17 critical stress fractures in the hull structure alone. The power core is operating at maybe 30% efficiency, and half the systems are showing red warning lights." Weapons Specialist Daeho Choi shook his head as he looked at the ship's armament. "Those aren't even real weapons, Captain. They're mining lasers, probably 50 years old. I've seen construction equipment with better firepower." Navigator Soyeon Han was already inside, calling back through the airlock. "The bridge looks like someone threw it together from spare parts. Half the controls don't have labels, and the ones that do are in 3 different alien languages." Captain Park took a deep breath and stepped aboard what the aliens had mockingly called Scrap Heap 7. The air inside smelled of ozone and oil, with an undertone of something that might have been decay. The corridors were narrow and poorly lit, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling that dripped strange liquids at irregular intervals. "Well, team," Park said, as his crew gathered around him in what passed for the ship's bridge, "this is what we have to work with. The question is, what do we do with it?" Chief Engineer Lee was already pulling panels off the walls, examining the maze of circuits and connections underneath. "Captain, this thing shouldn't even be flying. The power distribution system is held together with what looks like alien duct tape, but—" She paused, studying something more closely. "Actually, that might work in our favor. How do you figure that?" asked Troy, poking at a weapons control that sparked when he touched it. "Look at this," Lee said, pointing to the tangled mass of wires and components. "Everything is separate, independent. When alien ships are built, all their systems are integrated together in ways that make them efficient but impossible to modify without specialized equipment. This thing is so old and patched together that we can actually change it." Park felt the first stirring of hope since they had left Earth. "You mean we can upgrade it?" "Not upgrade exactly," Lee replied, her eyes beginning to shine with the look she got when she was solving an impossible problem. "But we can adapt it, make it do things it was never designed to do. The aliens think in terms of fixed systems and predetermined functions. We think in terms of making things work with whatever we have." Navigator Han was studying the sensor display, frowning at readings that made no sense according to any manual she had ever read. "Captain, these sensors are ancient. They're picking up energy signatures that modern systems would automatically filter out as background noise. But what if that's not background noise? What if it's information that newer systems are programmed to ignore?" The crew spent the next hour exploring every compartment of their new ship. What they found was a disaster by any normal standard. But to human eyes trained in making the impossible work, it began to look like opportunity, the life support system was a maze of patches and repairs, but it was also incredibly robust. Where a modern system might fail completely if one component broke, this ancient hodgepodge would keep running as long as any part of it still functioned. The power core was inefficient and unreliable, but it was also simple enough that they could understand every component. More importantly, it had connection points where additional power sources could be linked in, something that safety regulations would never allow on a newer ship. "Captain," Troy called from the weapons station, "I think I figured out why they gave us mining lasers instead of real weapons." "Because they want us to fail?" Park suggested. "No, sir, I don't think so. I think they genuinely believe these are the only weapons we could handle. But look at this." Troy had opened the control panel for the mining lasers and was pointing at the power feed. "These things are designed to cut through solid rock. They're built to handle massive power surges without burning out. If we could find a way to overcharge them, They'd hit a lot harder than anyone would expect, Park finished. How much harder? Give me some time to run the calculations, but I'm thinking maybe triple the standard output. The problem is targeting. Mining lasers are designed to hit stationary rocks, not moving ships. We'd have to control them manually. Engineer Lee looked up from where she was examining the ship's communication array. Actually, I might have a solution for that. This communication system is so overpowered for what it needs to do that we could probably use the excess energy to boost other systems, like maybe weapons targeting. Or sensors, Hun added. If we're going to be flying manually and shooting manually, we need to know exactly where everything is. Park felt something he had not experienced since leaving Earth. Excitement. How long would it take to make these modifications? Depends on what materials we can get, Lee replied. If we head for the asteroid belt in this system, we could mine raw materials and use the ship's fabrication equipment to make what we need. Maybe 2 months if everything goes right. And if things go wrong, Lee grinned, then we'll improvise. It's what humans do best. Over the next few days, the crew worked with an energy that surprised even themselves. They had been given a ship that was meant to humiliate them, but instead they were discovering possibilities that its designers had never imagined. Han found that the outdated sensors could detect stealth signatures that more advanced systems missed. The older technology operated on different principles, and what newer sensors dismissed as meaningless noise actually contained useful information. About ships trying to hide. Choi discovered that the mining lasers could be modified in ways that military weapons could not. Their simple, robust design meant that changes that would destroy a sophisticated weapon system could be absorbed and adapted to. Lee found that the ship's fabrication equipment designed for repairing mining tools in the field could be reprogrammed to create components that had never existed before. The systems were crude but flexible, allowing for innovations that would be impossible with more advanced but restrictive technology. Most importantly, they found that working together on an impossible problem brought out the best in all of them. They had been chosen for this mission because they were among Earth's finest, but now they were discovering what they could accomplish when their skills combined with pure human stubbornness. You know what? Park said one evening as they sat in the ship's tiny mess hall, eating rations that tasted like cardboard and planning modifications that should have been impossible. I'm starting to think the aliens made a mistake. How's that? Captain? Han asked. They gave us this ship thinking it would prove we're primitive and weak. But what they actually gave us is something we can completely rebuild without breaking any rules or violating any regulations. They handed us a clean slate and told us to make it work? Troy laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the metal corridors. So we're going to take their insult and turn it into something they never expected. Exactly, Park replied. By the time we're done with Scrap Heap 7, it's going to be something entirely new. Something that doesn't exist in any of their databases or tactical manuals. Lee raised her cup of coffee, which was one of the few things they had brought from Earth. That still tasted right. To human engineering. May it continue to confuse and amaze the galaxy? The others raised their cups as well. Outside the ship's small windows, the asteroid belt of the Zephyr system stretched endlessly, full of raw materials waiting to be transformed by human ingenuity and determination. They had been mocked with a scrap ship. Now they were going to show the galaxy what humans could do when they refused to accept limitations. 2 months had passed since the crew of what was once called Scrap Heap 7 had begun their work in the asteroid fields of the Zephyr system. The ship that now floated among the drifting rocks looked nothing like the broken mining vessel they had received from the Galactic Council. Fresh armor plating covered the old hull patches, new sensor arrays bristled from the bow and stern, and the engines hummed with a power that made the entire ship vibrate with barely contained energy. Captain Minho Park stood on the bridge, watching his crew run final tests on systems that should not have existed. Chief Engineer Yuna Lee was at her station, monitoring power levels that the original ship designers would have declared impossible. The modified power core was running at 120% of its original specifications, fed by additional energy cells salvaged from asteroid mining equipment and held together by human determination and engineering skill that bordered on artistry. "All systems showing green, Captain," Lee reported, though her definition of green would have terrified any alien engineer. The power distribution network was a maze of bypasses, overrides, and jury-rigged connections that somehow managed to work better than the original design. Navigator Soyoung Han looked up from her sensor station, where displays showed information gathered by equipment that combined technology from 6 different alien species in ways none of them had ever intended. "Sir, I'm picking up movement at the edge of sensor range. 5 contacts approaching on an intercept course." Weapons Specialist Daeho Choi cracked his knuckles as he settled into his position at the modified weapons console. The mining lasers had been transformed into something that no military database would recognize. The simple, robust systems had been overcharged, refocused, and equipped with targeting computers built from spare communication equipment. The result was ugly, improvised, and potentially devastating. "Can you identify the contacts?" Park asked. Han studied her displays, comparing the sensor readings against the database of known ship types they had compiled during their months of preparation. "They're moving in formation, military precision. Hull configurations match Corvan Syndicate vessels. Pirates, sir." Park felt his pulse quicken. For 2 months they had worked and planned and hoped, but until now it had all been theory. The modifications they had made to their ship existed only on paper and in computer simulations. They had never been tested in real combat against real enemies who would shoot back. "How many ships?" he asked. 5 fast attack vessels, Han replied. "Standard pirate configuration, they outgun us, outrun us, and outnumber us." "By conventional standards," Choi added with a grim smile. "But nothing about us is conventional anymore." The pirate fleet closed the distance rapidly, their ships moving with the casual confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. The lead vessel opened communication channels, broadcasting on frequencies that every ship in known space would recognize. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Vrix of the Corvan Syndicate. Prepare to be boarded. Surrender your cargo, and maybe we'll leave you with life support intact." Park looked around his bridge at the crew that had spent 2 months turning impossibility into reality. They had worked 18-hour shifts, cannibalizing equipment and rebuilding systems with their bare hands. They had created something that had never existed before, and now it was time to find out if their creation could survive its first real test. "Open a channel," Park ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the pirate command vessel. Commander Vrix was a reptilian alien with scales that shifted color when he moved and eyes that held the cold calculation of someone who had spent years taking whatever he wanted from those too weak to stop him. "I am Captain Park of the Earth." "Vessel Retribution," Park said, and he could see the surprise in the pirate's expression. Humans were known throughout this part of the galaxy as the new species with primitive technology and ships that barely functioned. "Humans," Rick said, and Park could hear the amusement in his voice. "This far from home in a ship that looks like it should have been scrapped decades ago. This will be easier than I thought." "Commander Vrix," Park replied, keeping his voice calm and professional. "I'm going to give you one chance to change course and leave this system. This is your only warning." The pirate commander's scales shifted to a color that Park's cultural briefings had taught him indicated extreme amusement. "You're threatening me? With that collection of scrap metal and good intentions? Human, you're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "I guess we'll find out which," Park said, and closed the communication channel. The pirate ships spread out in a standard attack formation, designed to surround their target and prevent escape. It was a tactic they had used successfully dozens of times against merchant vessels and mining ships. They approached with the lazy confidence of hunters who knew their prey had nowhere to run. "All stations report ready," Park announced to his crew. "Engineering reports power at maximum sustainable levels," Lee called out. "All modified systems are operating within acceptable parameters." Weapon systems armed and ready, Troy reported. I have target locks on all 5 vessels. Navigation standing by, Han added. Maneuvering systems are responding normally. The first pirate ship entered optimal weapons range and opened fire with energy beams designed to disable rather than destroy. They wanted the human vessel intact so they could strip it of anything valuable before spacing the crew. What happened next redefined what the pirates thought they knew about space combat. The Retribution moved like nothing they had ever seen. The gravitational manipulation technology that Lee had reverse-engineered from asteroid-moving equipment allowed the ship to change direction, without regard for momentum or inertia. Instead of the predictable straight-line movements that all spacecraft were limited to, the human vessel slipped sideways through space like a fish swimming through water. The pirate weapons fire passed harmlessly through empty space where their target should have been. Before they could adjust their aim, return fire from the Retribution struck the lead attack vessel with energy levels that made their shields collapse like paper in a hurricane. Impossible. Commander Vrick's broadcast on an open channel. Those are mining lasers. They can't possibly generate that much power. You're right, Troy muttered as he lined up his next shot. They can't. Good thing we don't use them the way they were designed. The modified mining lasers fired again, their energy output amplified by power feeds that drew from every system on the ship. The crystalline focusing arrays that Lee had built from salvaged asteroid processing equipment concentrated the beams into needles of coherent energy that punched through military-grade armor like it was made of foil. The second pirate ship tried to use its superior speed to get behind the human vessel, only to discover that the Retribution could turn faster than their computers could calculate firing solutions. The ship spun on its axis like a dancer, bringing its weapons to bear on targets that thought they were safely out of range. This is impossible, Vrick's voice cracked over the communication system. Human ships don't move like that. Human weapons don't hit that hard. You're right again, Park replied, opening the channel so his voice could be heard by all 5 pirate vessels. Human ships don't do these things. But this isn't really a human ship anymore. It's something new. The third pirate vessel lasted less than a minute under the combined assault of weapons that shouldn't have existed and maneuvers that violated every known law of space combat. Its engines went critical and exploded, sending debris spinning through the asteroid field. The remaining 2 ships tried to flee, their commanders finally understanding that they had encountered something far beyond their ability to handle. But the Retribution's modified engines, fed by power levels that would have been considered dangerous on any regulated vessel, allowed it to pursue targets that should have been able to outrun it easily. Please, Commander Vrick's broadcast as his ship's shields failed and his engines began to overheat. We surrender. Don't destroy us, Park considered the request. These were pirates who had spent years terrorizing merchant vessels and killing innocent crews. But they were also the first real test of what his crew had built, and that test had exceeded every expectation. You have 60 seconds to abandon ship, Park announced. After that, I'm going to finish what you started. Escape pods began launching from the surviving pirate vessels as their crews chose the slim chance of rescue over the certainty of death. Within minutes, the battle was over. 5 pirate ships had encountered 1 human vessel, and only the human vessel remained intact. Well, Lee said as she watched the power levels slowly return to normal, I'd say the field test was successful. More than successful, Han added, studying the sensor readings from the engagement. We didn't just win, we dominated. They never had a chance. Park looked at the debris field that had once been a pirate squadron, then at his crew who had turned mockery into victory through skill, determination, and the uniquely human ability to make the impossible work. Set course for the outer patrol routes, he ordered. I have a feeling word of this is going to spread, and we want to be ready for whatever comes next. The ship that had once been called Scrap Heap 7, now proudly bearing the name Retribution, turned away from the asteroid field where it had been reborn. Behind it floated the wreckage of enemies who had learned too late that underestimating human ingenuity was a fatal mistake. The first test was over. The real work was just beginning. The news traveled through the pirate networks faster than any ship could fly. In the dark corners of space stations and the hidden bases scattered throughout the outer systems, survivors of the Corvin Syndicate told stories that no one wanted to believe. They spoke of a human vessel that moved like liquid lightning and hit like the fist of an angry god. They described weapons that turned military shields into useless decorations and engines that ignored the basic laws of physics. Most who heard these tales laughed them off as the desperate lies of pirates trying to explain away their failure. A single human ship destroying an entire squadron seemed as impossible as a child defeating a trained warrior with nothing but harsh words and good intentions. But the stories kept coming. 3 weeks after the Corvin incident, the Bloodfang Raiders sent 8 ships to investigate reports of easy prey in the Zephyr system. Only 2 vessels limped back to their base, their hulls scarred by weapons that had cut through armor like heated knives through soft butter. The survivors spoke of a ship that seemed to dance between their attacks, striking with precision that made their own targeting computers look like toys built by amateurs. A month later, the Ironclaw Syndicate lost an entire fleet of 12 vessels to what their survivors described as a ghost ship that appeared from nowhere, destroyed everything in its path, and vanished back into the void before reinforcements could arrive. The few pirates who escaped in damaged escape pods babbled about weapons that struck from impossible angles and a ship that moved through 3-dimensional space as if the normal rules did not apply to it. Deep in the heart of Alphenspace, Admiral Kent studied the reports that crossed his desk with growing interest and disbelief. The crystal being had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries and had never encountered anything that challenged his understanding of space combat, but the pattern emerging from these pirate encounters was unlike anything in his extensive experience. Computer, display tactical analysis of human vessel encounters. Kent commanded from his position in the command center of his flagship. The holographic display showed a star map dotted with red marks indicating pirate losses. Each mark represented multiple vessels destroyed or disabled by a single human ship that should have been easy prey for any organized attack. The pattern was clear and deeply troubling. Analysis complete, the computer reported in its calm, mechanical voice. Single vessel of unknown capability has engaged 47 pirate vessels over the past 3 months. Enemy losses, 43. Ships destroyed, 17 crews captured, estimated pirate strength in this sector reduced by 68%. Human losses, 0 vessels, 0 personnel. Admiral Kent's crystalline form shifted colors as he processed this information. In his long military career, he had seen many unusual tactics and innovative weapons, but nothing that produced results like these. A single ship achieving what would normally require an entire battle fleet was beyond the realm of possibility. Display estimated human vessel capabilities based on encounter data, he ordered. Warning: data suggests capabilities that exceed known technological parameters. Estimated weapon output 300% above standard for vessel size. Estimated maneuverability 400% above maximum theoretical limits. Estimated shield strength unknown due to lack of successful enemy hits. The Admiral studied the display for a long time, his ancient mind working through possibilities that grew more disturbing with each passing moment. Either the reports were completely false, which seemed unlikely given their consistency across multiple independent sources, or the humans had achieved something that should have been impossible. Set course for the Zephyr system, Kent ordered. Assemble Battle Group 7. We're going to investigate these claims personally. Meanwhile, aboard the Retribution, Captain Minho Park and his crew were discovering that success brought its own challenges. The ship that had once struggled to maintain basic life support now hummed with power that made the bulkheads vibrate. Chief Engineer Una Lee had continued her modifications, integrating salvaged components from destroyed pirate vessels into their already impressive array of improvised systems. Captain, we've got another problem, Navigator Soyang Han reported from her station. I'm picking up increased military traffic in the surrounding systems. It looks like someone's taken notice of our activities. Park wasn't surprised. They had been operating in the outer systems for months now, and their string of victories against pirate forces had been impossible to hide. Word was bound to reach the regular military forces eventually. What kind of military traffic? He asked. Alpha. Imperial Navy, sir. Heavy cruiser signatures moving in formation. They're headed this way. Weapons specialist Daeho Choi looked up from his console where he was calibrating their modified laser arrays. How many ships? 3 heavy cruisers, Han replied. Standard. Battle group formation. They're not trying to hide their approach. Park felt his stomach tighten. Fighting pirates was one thing. Pirates were criminals with stolen ships and improvised tactics. But the Althan Imperial Navy was a professional military force with ships designed for warfare and crews trained in advanced combat techniques. Their heavy cruisers were some of the most powerful vessels in known space. Time to intercept? Park asked. At their current speed, they'll reach our position in 6 hours. Han calculated. Lee looked up from her engineering station with an expression that mixed excitement and terror. Captain, our modifications have been tested against pirates, but we've never faced real military hardware. Those cruisers have shields designed to stop battleship-class weapons and armor that could shrug off everything we've thrown at pirates so far. Are you saying we can't win? Park asked. I'm saying we don't know, Lee replied honestly. Our weapons are powerful, but they're still based on mining lasers. Our maneuverability is impressive, but those ships have military-grade targeting systems, and there are 3 of them. Troy checked his weapons status one more time. Sir, we could try to run. Our engines are fast enough to outrun them if we get a head start. Park looked around the bridge at the crew that had spent months turning an insult into a weapon. They had faced impossible odds before and found ways to win through determination and innovation, but this was different. This was the real test of everything they had built. No, he said finally. We're not running. We came out here to prove that humans deserve their place in the galactic community. Running from the first real challenge we face would prove the opposite. So we fight 3 heavy cruisers with a modified mining ship? Han asked. We fight 3 heavy cruisers with human ingenuity, Park corrected. We've already proven that. Conventional thinking doesn't apply to us. Now we get to prove it on a bigger stage. Lee grinned, the expression lighting up her face with anticipation. I've got a few more modifications we could try. They're experimental, and they might overload our power core, but if they work, we might actually have a chance, Troy finished. Then let's get to work, Park ordered. We've got 6 hours to prepare for the fight of our lives. As the crew of the Retribution began their final preparations, word of the approaching confrontation spread through the local space lanes. Merchant ships changed course to avoid the area. Space stations went to high alert. Even the remaining pirates in the sector found reasons to be elsewhere. Everyone knew that what happened in the next few hours would determine whether the human success story continued or ended in spectacular failure. The converted mining ship that had become a legend was about to face the ultimate test against forces that represented the peak of galactic military power. Admiral Kent's battle group approached with the confidence of veterans who had never met an enemy they could not defeat. They expected to find either wreckage or a fleeing human vessel that would finally put an end to the ridiculous stories that had been circulating through the sector. What they would find instead was something that would change their understanding of what was possible in space combat forever. Admiral Kent's 3 heavy cruisers dropped out of faster than light, travel at the edge of the Zephyr system like ancient gods descending from the heavens. Each ship stretched over 800 meters in length, their crystalline hulls reflecting starlight in patterns that spoke of power and authority. These were vessels built for war, carrying enough firepower to level cities and protected by shield systems that had never been breached in 2 centuries of service. The Retribution hung motionless in space near a cluster of asteroids, looking tiny and fragile compared to the approaching fleet. To Admiral Kent's experienced eyes, the human vessel appeared to be exactly what the Council records claimed, a converted mining ship with improvised modifications and delusions of grandeur. Sir, we're receiving a communication from the human vessel, reported Commander Zell from the communications station of Kent's flagship. Put it through, the Admiral ordered, curious to hear what the primitive humans would say in the face of overwhelming force. Captain Park's image appeared on the main screen, flanked by his crew on a bridge that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and determination. The Admiral could see jury-rigged equipment and exposed conduits that would have horrified any proper military engineer. Admiral Kent, Park said with a respectful nod, I understand you've come to investigate reports about our activities in this sector. Indeed I have, Captain Park, Kent replied, his crystalline voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority. The stories being told about your vessel are quite remarkable. Pirates claim you've achieved impossible victories with a ship that should barely be able to maintain life support. The reports are accurate, Admiral. We've been patrolling the outer systems and dealing with pirate threats as requested by the Galactic Council. Kent studied the human captain's face, looking for signs of deception or madness. He found neither, which was somehow more disturbing than either would have been. Captain, my scanners indicate your vessel is indeed a converted mining ship with improvised modifications. Are you seriously suggesting that such a vessel has been defeating entire pirate fleets? I'm not suggesting it, Admiral. I'm stating it as fact. The crystalline being's form shifted to colors that indicated confusion and growing irritation. Captain Park, you are facing 3 heavy cruisers of the Althan Imperial Navy. Each of my ships carries more firepower than your entire vessel could survive. Your only rational option is immediate surrender? Park was quiet for a moment, consulting with his crew in voices too low for the communication system to pick up. When he looked back at the screen, his expression was calm but determined. Admiral, with respect, you're making the same mistake the pirates made. You're judging us based on what you think we should be capable of, not what we actually are capable of. And what exactly are you capable of, Captain? Would you like a demonstration? What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations to come. Though most of the students would initially refuse to believe the records were accurate, the Retribution moved first, accelerating toward the Althan formation at speeds that should have torn apart any ship not equipped with military-grade inertial compensators. But instead of flying straight like every other vessel in known space, the human ship began to move in patterns that violated basic physics. Impossible, Commander Zell breathed as he watched the tactical display. They're changing direction without decelerating. Ships can't do that. Admiral Kent watched in fascination as the human vessel seemed to slide sideways through space, turning and weaving like a fish swimming through water instead of a massive object moving through vacuum. His targeting computers, designed to predict the movement of conventional spacecraft, could not establish a firing solution on something that moved like this. All ships, open fire, Kent ordered. Concentrate on their engines. The 3 heavy cruisers unleashed a barrage of energy weapons that could have destroyed a small moon. Beams of coherent light and streams of charged particles filled the space where the Retribution should have been, but the human ship was no longer there. It had spun away from the attack like a dancer avoiding a clumsy partner, moving with grace that seemed impossible for something built from scrap metal and determination. Return fire from the Retribution struck Kent's flagship with power levels that made no sense according to any database. The Admiral watched in shock as his shields, which had never been breached in 2 centuries of service, began to flicker and fail under the assault of weapons that should have been incapable of penetrating basic civilian protection. Shield generators. Overloading, reported the tactical officer. They're using some kind of frequency modulation that our systems can't compensate for. Chief Engineer Lee had discovered that Althan shields operated on rotating frequency patterns designed to deflect conventional energy weapons. But the modified mining lasers of the Retribution produced a chaotic spread of frequencies that overwhelmed the shield generator's ability to adapt. What should have been sophisticated defense became useless decoration under the assault of improvised human engineering. The 2nd heavy cruiser tried to use its superior size and firepower to ram the human vessel, confident that nothing is small as the Retribution could survive a collision with 800 meters of armored warship. Instead, they watched in amazement as the human ship simply stepped aside through space, using gravitational manipulation technology that turned the laws of physics into suggestions rather than rules. "This is impossible," Admiral Kent transmitted on an open channel as his weapons continued to fire at empty space, while the human ship struck his fleet with surgical precision. "Your vessel cannot move like that. Your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses." "You're right, Admiral." Captain Park's voice came back clearly through the communication system. "By all the rules of space combat that your people wrote, none of this should be possible. But humans didn't help write those rules, which means we're not bound by them." Weapons Specialist Choi had spent months studying recordings of Alphan combat doctrine, identifying blind spots in their ship design where their own weapons could not effectively target. The Retribution exploited these weaknesses ruthlessly, staying in positions where the superior firepower of the heavy cruisers became a liability rather than an advantage. The third cruiser tried to break away from the engagement, its captain finally understanding that they were facing something far beyond their ability to handle. But the Retribution's modified engines, fed by power levels that would have been considered dangerous on any regulated vessel, allowed it to pursue targets that should have been able to outrun it with ease. "Admiral," Park's voice cut through the chaos of battle, "your ships are disabled but intact. Your crews are alive. I'm offering you the same choice I gave the pirates: abandon ship or be destroyed." Admiral Kent looked around his bridge at systems that were failing one by one under the assault of impossible weapons wielded by beings who should have been helpless. His shields were gone, his engines were damaged, and his weapons could not hit a target that moved like nothing in his centuries of experience. "How?" he asked, genuine confusion replacing the authority that had carried him through countless victories. "How did you do this?" "We stopped thinking about what ships should be able to do," Park replied, "and started thinking about what they could do if you weren't afraid to change everything." The battle was over. 3 heavy cruisers of the Alphan Imperial Navy hung powerless in space, their crews evacuating to escape pods as their vessels slowly lost life support. The Retribution floated among them like a predator surveying its defeated prey, its hull unmarked by enemy fire that had never been able to find its target. "Admiral," Park said as rescue ships began arriving to collect the Alphan survivors, "I think it's time the Council reconsidered humanity's place in the galactic community." Admiral Kent, floating in an escape pod and watching his flagship slowly drift dead in space, could only agree. The impossible had become reality, and everything he thought he knew about space combat had been proven wrong by a species that refused to accept the limits others tried to place on them. Word of the battle would spread through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The humans, dismissed as primitives with crude technology, had just defeated one of the most powerful fleets in known space using nothing but determination, creativity, and the absolute refusal to believe that anything was truly impossible. The age of human ingenuity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The emergency session of the Galactic Council, convened exactly 72 hours after news of Admiral Kent's defeat reached the Central Worlds. Representatives from 12 species filled the Great Chamber, but the atmosphere was completely different from the day when humans had first stood before them asking for membership. Where once there had been laughter and mockery, now there was whispered conversation and worried glances. The humans entered through the same massive doors they had walked through months ago, but everything else had changed. Captain Minho Park led his crew into the chamber wearing uniforms that bore the scars of real combat, their faces carrying the quiet confidence of those who had proven themselves against impossible odds. Behind them walked Ambassador Jiho Kim, who had spent the journey from Earth trying to understand how his species had gone from galactic joke to galactic concern in such a short time. Council Speaker Vex stood at his elevated platform, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that seemed somehow dimmer than before. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the casual authority it had held during their previous meeting. "Captain Park," Vex began, and the entire chamber fell silent. The Council has received detailed reports regarding your recent activities in the outer systems. We understand that the vessel we provided has undergone certain modifications. Park stepped forward, maintaining the respectful posture that diplomatic protocol required while radiating a presence that made it clear he was no longer asking for permission. Speaker Vex, honored representatives, the modifications were necessary to complete the mission you assigned us. We were tasked with dealing with pirate threats in the outer systems, and we have done so successfully. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the current state of the ship that had once been. Scrap Heap 7. The assembled aliens stared at an image that challenged everything they thought they knew about starship design. The Retribution looked like something from their darkest strategic nightmares, a vessel that combined technologies from multiple species in ways that should have been impossible but clearly worked better than anyone had expected. "This is what you have done with our gift," Vex said, though the word gift now carried an entirely different meaning than it had months ago. "This is what we built when you gave us the freedom to innovate without restrictions," Park replied calmly. "The vessel you provided was indeed a derelict, but it was also a clean slate. No safety regulations to limit modifications. No integrated systems that couldn't be changed, no predetermined functions that had to be preserved." Chief Engineer Yuna Lee stepped forward, carrying a datapad that contained schematics and technical specifications that would have been considered classified military secrets if any military had been capable of developing them. "Honored representatives, what we've created demonstrates the potential that exists when different technologies and perspectives work together. Our innovations could benefit every species represented here." Representative Quell of the Jovian Coalition, a being that resembled living water contained in a transparent shell, spoke for the first time. "You defeated 3 Althan heavy cruisers with a single converted mining vessel. Such a feat should have been impossible." "It was impossible," Captain Park agreed, "according to conventional thinking. But humans have never been very good at accepting the word impossible. We prefer to think of it as a starting point for innovation." Navigator Soyeon Han stepped forward with her own datapad. "The technologies we developed aren't magic or mystery science. They're applications of known principles used in ways that no one had tried before. Everything we built could be reproduced and improved upon by any species willing to think beyond traditional limitations." Weapons Specialist Daho Choi joined his crewmates, adding his voice to their presentation. "The weapons modifications we made turned mining tools into effective combat systems by overcharging them in ways that safety regulations would never allow. The maneuverability improvements came from using gravitational manipulation technology for propulsion instead of just cargo handling. The defensive systems worked because we combined incompatible technologies until they became compatible." Admiral Kent himself appeared via holographic communication from his hospital bed, where he was recovering from injuries sustained during his ship's evacuation. His crystalline form was cracked and dimmed, but his voice carried the weight of hard-won experience. "Honored Council," the Admiral said, "I have commanded fleets for 2 centuries and have never encountered anything like what these humans have achieved. They did not simply defeat my battle group. They revolutionized space combat itself. Every assumption we have made about what is possible in warfare has been proven wrong." The chamber buzzed with alien conversation as representatives discussed the implications of what they were hearing. The humans had not just succeeded in their assigned mission. They had exceeded it so dramatically that they had fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Council Speaker Vex raised one of his arms, and the chamber fell silent once again. "Captain Park, the Council acknowledges that our initial assessment of human capabilities was incomplete and incorrect. However, this creates a new challenge. The technologies you have developed represent a significant military advantage. How do we ensure that such power is used responsibly?" Ambassador Kim stepped forward for the first time since entering the chamber. "Honored Speaker, Earth has no desire to dominate or threaten other species. We came here seeking cooperation and partnership. The innovations our people have developed are offered freely to all members of the galactic community, with the understanding that we are now equal partners in that community? Equal partners, Vex repeated, as if testing the sound of the words. Yes, I believe that is precisely what you have become. The vote on humanity's full membership in the Galactic Council was unanimous, but everyone present understood that this was not the same membership that had been offered months ago as a gesture of patronizing tolerance. This was recognition of a species that had proven it could not only survive in the galactic community, but reshape it according to human values of innovation, determination, and the refusal to accept limitations. Over the following months, human engineering consultants worked on vessels throughout the galaxy, bringing their unique perspective on adaptive technology and unconventional solutions to problems that had seemed unsolvable. The Retribution-class vessels, designed by combined human-alien engineering teams, became the backbone of the Council's defense fleet. Captain Park, now Admiral Park of the Joint Defense Command, kept the original Retribution as his flagship. Its hull still bore the patches and modifications that told the story of its transformation from insult to legend. New crew members would often ask about the ship's unusual appearance, and Park would tell them about the day when humanity was given a broken mining vessel as a joke and turned it into proof that human determination combined with human creativity was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Years later, when new species applied for council membership, they were often presented with decommissioned vessels as their first contribution to galactic defense. But now everyone understood this as an opportunity rather than insult. It was a chance to demonstrate what could be achieved when beings were pushed beyond their comfort zones and forced to innovate or fail. The tradition became known as the Human Challenge, and those who succeeded in transforming their given vessels earned immediate respect throughout the galactic community. Those who failed were given assistance and encouragement to try again, because humanity had taught the galaxy that failure was not the end of the story, but simply the beginning of the next attempt. Chief Engineer Lee often stood in the Retribution's engine room, surrounded by the impossible technology she had created from spare parts and stubbornness. Young engineers from dozens of species would visit to study her work, and she would always tell them the same thing. The secret was not in the technology itself, but in the willingness to believe that any problem could be solved if you were creative enough and refused to give up. The aliens had mocked humanity with a scrap ship, expecting failure and humiliation. Instead, they had given them the foundation for a revolution that changed the galaxy forever. The human story became a legend told throughout known space, proving that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the cruelest insults, and that determination combined with ingenuity could overcome any obstacle the universe might place in the way. In the end, the Council had intended to teach humanity about their limitations. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy that there were no limitations, only challenges waiting for someone stubborn enough to solve them.